This is the second video in a series of videos based on my book critiquing the epoch of Arundhati and the date of Mahabharata derived by Mr Nilesh Oak, titled as Arundhati Vasishta Observation is not a falsifier. This is brought to you by Jayashree Saranathan. The first video, titled as Did Arundhati walk in front of Vasishta any time in the past, disproved Mr Nilesh Oak's epoch of Arundhati on the basis of first, tradition. The tradition of Arundhati is such that she is being held high as a chaste woman, much like how Rama is being held high from among men. Only two icons we have, one for each gender, and among females she is being held high as an extremely chaste woman, and her name is being invoked even today in the Vedic marriages. Secondly, the etymology of Arundhati is such that she is one who doesn't obstruct. In her own words, told in the context in Mahabharata, she is one who has held on to her husband without slipping. By this, it is conveyed that she was clinging to him or behind him, but never had gone in front of him. Had she gone in front of him, the Vedic sages would have dropped her from the celestial sphere and substituted her with another star. Thirdly, I traced the path of the two stars, and the path showed that it was circumpolar. In circumpolar path or in circumpolar motion, it is not possible to say which star in a binary went ahead of the other, because they will be appearing in different alignments within 24 hours. And finally, I showed the scientific reason for why Mr Nilesh Oak is wrong in his hypothesis. Mr Nilesh Oak had taken into account only the right ascension, whereas the position of a star must be determined by right ascension and declination, much like the longitude and latitude of the earth to locate a position or a place on the map. In addition to right ascension and declination, the latitude of the observer must also be taken into account for any mathematical calculation to derive which star went ahead of the other. Mr Nilesh Oak had miserably failed on that account, and he kept on to or held on to the Arundhati observation and made it pivotal to his research on arriving at the date of Mahabharata. Mr Nilesh Oak had made the Arundhati Vasishta observation critical to Mahabharata date. Passion for an issue. Here, his passion for Arundhati observation given by Vedavyasa cannot be questioned as an inspiration for a research, but it was a different take as far as Mr Nilesh Oak is concerned. In the very beginning of his book, he has written that if he could solve this problem of Arundhati, then only he would be willing to put extra efforts to understand the nakshatras and position of planets in order to comprehend the remaining Mahabharata observations. If, on the other hand, he could convincingly prove that Arundhati observation was not a mystery at all, but rather an absurd statement introduced by either the original or later authors, Mr. Nilesh Oak says that he would be saved from the torture of understanding or interpreting the remaining Mahabharata observations. Anyone wishing to solve an issue would learn the subject first. But here, Mr. Nilesh Oak has preferred to gain the knowledge of the subject after solving the issue, or in other words, solving the Arundhati observation by means of his simulator. No one can be expected to have prior knowledge of the subject, prior knowledge of the factors. But before entering the research, one should have gained them. Then only he would have known whether the Arundhati observation is a reliable one to test. But unfortunately, he himself has admitted, that is in his own words, he had not gained the knowledge of the subject prior hand, instead went steep into the Arundhati observation. Let us see why he was so. Why did Mr. Nilesh Oak choose the Arundhati observation? He writes in his book that he intuitively felt that Arundhati was a factual observation. Yes, it was a factual observation recorded by Vedavyasa. No intuition is needed to know that. He continues, since he could not come up with a rationale on the part of the original author of Mahabharata to write or insert something that would be impossible, as they could have always gotten away with mentioning few conjunctions of planets with each other or with nakshatras. That is, Mr. Nilesh Oak says that Arundhati observation is impossible, but written by the author of Mahabharata. So, what is the rationale behind that? How to justify that such an impossible observation has got into the text? So, he thought it is a factual observation that he has to work on. The fact is, Arundhati observation was not the only impossible or unnatural observation. There are in all 4 such observations given in Mahabharata, and unfortunately Mr. Nilesh Oak had not known the other unnatural, impossible observations. Let me explain what those observations are. There are 4 unnatural observations mentioned as nimittas in the Mahabharata text before the war. The foremost one is known to almost everybody, that is Arundhati putting her husband at her back, which Mr. Nilesh Oak treats as an astronomy phenomenon. In the same context, Vedavyasa has written that the pole star made opposite movement. The pole star cannot move if it is at the NCP, but that it had moved means that there was no star at the NCP during the Mahabharata times, but there was a star close by which was treated as the pole star, and that star had moved in the anti-clockwise direction, which is the normal movement. But at that time, Vedavyasa had noticed that it made an opposite movement and treated it as a nimitta. That means it was a transitory. That is not a permanent movement. Just it shifted a little and then came back to its position. The wonderful fact about this nimitta is that both Arundhati and the pole star observations had happened at the same part of the sky and almost at the same visual height. Unfortunately, Mr. Nilesh Oak has ignored this or has not detected this observation at all, probably because he could not think that this nimitta can be simulated in his Voyager simulator. But he pokes fun on Mr. R.N. Iyengar for clubbing these two together. He ridicules him by saying that it is like saying there was a hypothetical observer at the time of Mahabharata who saw Arundhati going ahead of her husband, and therefore she also thought that pole star made an apasavya movement. The fact is, this was not told by an hypothetical observer. It was told by Vedavyasa himself. And while saying this, while writing this, Mr Nilesh Oak also has written, if at all there was a pole star, that is, and not pole star, if there was one available, he has written. So, he has believed there was no pole star at the time of Mahabharata War, that is, during his time of, his date of Mahabharata War. Let us see that. This is the illustration of, it's actually a plan view. This is a plan view of the celestial sphere, where we are seeing the precision circle, and here is Mr Nilesh Oak's date of Mahabharata War. One can see there is no star, no pole star at that point in the precision circle. So naturally, Mr Nilesh Oak thinks there is no Dhruva Nakshatra or pole star at that time nearby. Nearby it is vacant. The nearest one is this, which is Iota Draconis, which is almost 7 to 8 degrees away. So it's not possible that it was treated as a pole star. People would have just looked at the pole, that is NCP, as an assumed point only. And there is another one close by also. It is here, that is Theta Bootis in Nilesh Oak's date of Mahabharata War. That is why he is saying there is no pole star. If at all there was a pole star, it would have moved in the opposite direction as observed by an hypothetical observer, least realizing that Vedavyasa himself had written that. But compared to that, look at Thuban. Thuban is a time when the traditional date of Mahabharata has been located. It is too close to the precision circle, just within 2 degrees. So there is every scope to believe that this was treated as a pole star and it had made a rightward movement. See Arundhati and Vasishtha close by. So both of them had made a rightward movement at the same time and mentioned by Vedavyasa as a nimitta. Now there is another one. This is told by Karna in Hastinapur when Krishna had gone over there for the peace mission. Karna has said that Mars was making a vakri, that is backward movement, while it was in conjunction with Sun. Mars is an outer planet, that is outer orbit, known as superior planet. A superior planet cannot go in retrogression when it is in conjunction with the Sun. That is a rule. That is the name. By nature it is happening like that. One cannot see a superior planet making a retrograde movement while it is on the side of or close to the Sun. But Karna mentions this as a nimitta once again. Look at it. It is a nimitta. That means it was just for a fraction of a second or just for a flash of a moment that it appeared to move towards Anuradha. That is from Jyeshta, it had moved to Anuradha. Around that time, this is how the constellation appeared, almost horizontal, close to the horizon. It was setting after the Sun. So, I am showing Mars position near Antares, that is Jyeshta. So, it must move towards its left, if at all it is making a movement. And the planet cannot be seen to have moved just in front of our eyes. It is impossible. But he has said it moved towards Anuradha. So, the possible movement could have been this. But how could it happen? It cannot happen. It cannot go retrograde in that position when it is with the Sun. And it cannot move just in front of his eyes. But he has reported that here also. You can see that the movement is to our right. Now, there is another one I am going to show. This is told by Vedavyasa himself, in the same context of narrating the nimittas of Arundhati and pole star, he is saying the two planets were rising with coppery red crust. That is, they were near the horizon, and he is saying this particular observation in the same verse where he has said that the Saptarishi Mandalas looked dim. Earlier, he had seen Arundhati shifting the position, or Arundhati putting her husband at the back. In the same context, he says the Saptarishi Mandala, the entire constellation has dimmed down, and he can see two planets rising with coppery red crest. When we read the word, the coppery red, the red color, that is Tamra Varnam. When we see the coppery red, then we are immediately reminded of a phenomenon of spectral differentiation. There is some spectral differentiation that he has seen and he is reporting, and that is a main clue for us to unravel what has been happening there. Let me show this figure. Under normal conditions, a star that appears at the horizon will appear to move towards the zenith, that is towards our left, because of the differentiation in the atmospheric refraction happening at that time. Normally, the red rays have longer wavelength. In the Vibgaya, we can say the red rays or the red color is appearing on top because of the longer wavelength, and then it goes for a longer distance. Whereas at the horizon level, what happens? The rays have to pass through a long way, and the red rays cross a long way, whereas the blue rays just get scattered into the sky. That is why due to the refractive differences, that is the red light when it is entering into a medium gets refracted towards normal. Because of that, the appearance of the star is not its actual position but an apparent position which is slightly above its original position. The figure shows how normally a star at the horizon at the time of rising will appear, in which case the bottom will be red in color, the top will be blue in color. This phenomenon can be noticed in the case of the sun and the moon at the time of rising and at the time of setting also. But what does Vyasa say? He says, or he gives an unusual, unnatural, impossible, irrational phenomenon of the red crest of a star at the horizon. I have shown a figure like this of actual position and an apparent position. The actual position cannot go down to our right. It has to, that is, whatever refraction that is causing the shift in the position of the star or a planet would move the star or the planet to the left, not to the right. This can happen only in negative refractive index, which is impossible to happen in nature. But Vedavyasa has noted that. He has noted specifically that it has a red crest. Thereby, we are led to think that he has noticed the blue crest in other occasions. Meticulously they have watched. But now he is saying the star, that is two planets are appearing with red crest. That means something unnatural. That is why he has mentioned it as the nimitta. So this particular nimitta of showing a kind of difference in the refractive index of an unnatural nature, it just gives us a hint on what we have to look for. This is a scientific phenomenon, not an astronomy phenomenon. See, all these have shifted to the right. Arundhati, pole star, Mars, and the two planets with red top means they have shifted to the right. So this must be worked into, and the scientific explanation for this must be worked into. But alas, Mr Nilesh Oak did not or could not even grasp, but these were there available in the text, that was intuitively stuck up with the Arundhati observation, thinking that it is an astronomy observation, and then kept on working on it, that it must be a true observation. Mr. Nilesh Oak's attachment to the Arundhati observation is such that he says that by explaining that he is infusing scientific acumen and logical reasoning in Indic minds. These two words he often speaks of in his videos, in social media, and he always thinks that his idea of Epoch of Arundhati is highly scientific, and by having clinched on that, he is infusing the scientific acumen in Indic minds. Why this interest in infusing scientific acumen? It is because he thinks the traditional Indian people have twisted the concepts. He says Patanjali's original Pratyaksha Anuvana Agama Pramana was twisted by ignoring the Pratyaksha and Anumana and by insisting on Shabda. And this insistence on Shabda was done by none other than gurus, godmen, teachers, professors and elders. He has written this in his blog. And in his opinion, this kind of twisting or insistence on the Shabda by the gurus, teachers, professors, elders, etc. had led to the dark age of science in India. And here, Mr. Nilesh Oak wants to work on infusing scientific acumen and bringing in an age of science in India, and his Epoch of Arundhati is one of the means by which he has done that. So, how does he infuse scientific acumen through this Arundhati Vasishtha observation? He has written that he is doing it by means of Karl Popper's testability, falsifiability and simplicity ideas, which he used in the case of solving the Arundhati Vasishtha observation. So by invoking the name of Karl Popper and his theories and applying it in a dating event such as the dating of the Mahabharata, for which he had intuitively taken the Arundhati Vasishtha observation from out of the 4 unnatural observations, and finding that he is able to infuse scientific acumen. He often speaks about a concept called falsification, that he has falsified the other researchers by his Arundhati Vasishtha observation. This is what we often hear him say. So let us know what is this falsification all about. It was given by Sir Karl Popper, a British national, Austria-born British national, who was known for the philosophy of science. He was a philosopher of science, and he attempted to give theories on how to differentiate science from pseudoscience, the policy of demarcation, how to demarcate science from pseudoscience. For that, he has given a method called falsification, by which he says a theory can be verified in many ways. You can keep on doing experiments and verify a theory, but that is not the right way. He says a single statement or singular statements can disprove, falsify, test the theory to be false. So a singular statement falsifying a theory is needed to prove whether the theory is true or not. And this also helps in establishing whether that theory or the thing taken belongs to the realm of science or metaphysics or pseudoscience. For he thinks only scientific things can be falsified. One cannot falsify a pseudoscience. According to Karl Popper, the falsifier is explained in this way. There are white swans everywhere. We can say all swans are white. This is a universal statement. To falsify this, one must have seen black swans. That is, this is contradicted by black swans, and the black swans form the basic statement. That all swans are white can be falsified by a basic statement that there are black swans. This concept of falsification was taken by Mr. Nilesh Oak to prove that the epoch of Arundhati has a high degree of falsifiability and relevance for the war, which he says that the higher the testability of an observation, higher is its relevance for the dating of Mahabharata, and this higher is worth of such an observation. He says, even if you are removing the other observations that are given below, they are of less higher or lower relevance. Even if they are removed, the presence of epoch of Arundhati alone can establish the date of Mahabharata War. By this, a single observation has been taken by him as a test of falsification. That is the observation of Arundhati Vasishta changing their position. And this is taken as a falsifier, and he says that this resulted in the discovery of the epoch of Arundhati, which was going for more than 6,000 years when Mr. Nilesh Oak thinks Arundhati had walked in front of Vasishta, and this is what Vedavyasa had meant, while in reality Vedavyasa had meant the change in the position as a nimitta and not as one that is going on for 6,000 years. By using the epoch of Arundhati, Mr. Nilesh Oak claims that he has falsified 96% plus of all the previously proposed years for Mahabharata War. In the course of it, he has falsified even the traditional date of Mahabharata, which took place on 3136 BCE, that is 5155 years ago. Viewers, please be informed of two things. One is that the Mahabharata War and the Kali Yuga date are interconnected. After the Mahabharata War, that is 35 years after the Mahabharata War, Krishna exited the world, and from the time Krishna exited the world, Kali Yuga time computation had started. The second point is the Kali Yuga time computation has been so perfected that there are sutras and formulae to calculate the day, nakshatra, weekday of any year in future or any time in Kali Yuga. For example, a person wants to know the Kali Yuga year, the year name, that is the Varsha name, the Tithi, Nakshatra and weekday in a year, say 10,000 CE in future. It is possible to say that using this calculation, using this formula. So it is not a joke to have this calculation, this time calculation of Kali Yuga. It has been meticulously planned and given to us, which we are still following. It is being invoked. This time is being invoked or remembered millions of times in our country even today, in all the religious activities. Disregarding this fact, Mr. Nilesh Oak has hiked this Mahabharata date 2000 earlier than Kali Yuga date and claims that he has scientifically proven or falsified the dates, other dates, which include this traditional date of Mahabharata also. Now, let me show the timeline of the events. At 3136 BCE, this is a traditional date of Mahabharata that we deduce from Kali Yuga, which we have to establish. All the astronomy observations were meant for this date only. But instead of establishing this date, Mr. Nilesh Oak has created his Epoch of Arundhati as a falsifier, placed the date at 5561 BCE as a Mahabharata date, and shifted all the astronomy observations from 3136 to 5561 BCE. We can know how far they will be true. They are not true at all, not even one of them. And I can explain this, or I can explain the gravity of this shifting by means of an analogy of our Indian independence year. Our Indian independence year was 1947. Now we have completed 72 years. We are in the 73rd year. Suppose a person says that he will research into establishing the Indian independence year and comes up with the conclusion that the Indian independence has happened at, say, the year 1920. How true it will be? We know it is not true, because this beginning of this year is still in memory, just recent memory. But just imagine the Kali Yuga start that happened 5000 years ago, out of memory. Suppose someone comes and then says, no, that was not the year I have researched. I have put it there in 7000 years. How it will be? It will be in the same way like how the Indian independence year is twisted. This is what is happening in the name of dating Mahabharata. And Mr. Nilesh Oak has precisely done that. Since Mr. Nilesh Oak is often talking about scientific nature of his research by adopting the falsifier of Karl Popper to Arundhati observation, we are led to check whether he is right in his approach, because the outcome is not what is expected. The outcome doesn't tally with the traditional date. So let me do an analysis of it. The first idea that I am presenting here is given by Thomas Kuhn, the foremost critique of Karl Popper. He did not accept Popper's view of the falsification methodology, saying that result is what one wants to see. The people have the end result and they will be working for it like hook and crook. That's what he says. Like school children who may not get the result in the first instance itself, but they know what the result has to be, and they will be working in different ways to somehow get the result and show it to the teacher. So that is what the researcher will do, and this will not give the result of a scientific research, and this will not prove a theory, and this is not what science is about. That is what Mr. Kuhn says. The same thing is applicable to Mr. Nilesh Oak's theory also. He always shows this particular window where Arundhati is seen to be going ahead of Vasishta. He has not bothered about what happened before or what happened afterwards. As Thomas Kuhn has said, he just wanted to look at that part where the end result that he had in mind appeared. Whereas we showed in the previous video how they appeared. As the constellation was moving from one side to the other, it was going upright like a javelin throw. It was just going upright and then turn, which was in the forward motion. In the forward motion, always Vasishta was in the lead. I am showing here a triangle to show the apex. That is there at Vasishta, as though Arundhati was clinging on to Vasishta. The same alignment has continued here also. After they have crossed the meridian, when Vasishtha is clearly ahead of or in front of Arundhati. So this is in tune with the term Mano Arundhati told by Arundhati herself that she was holding on to without slipping. She was clinging on to the shoulders of Vasishtha and she has just moved throughout in the same alignment only. And in the time of Mahabharata, that is Mr. Nilesh Oak's time of Mahabharata War, the constellation appeared upright. Even then, she was clinging on to Arundhati. The Arundhati was clinging on to Vasishtha only. Today, the constellation appears like this at Hastinapur. You can see that it is almost horizontal. And you can see the sixth star, that is Miser and Alcor. The same kind of alignment. I am enlarging that alignment. See how they are. The same triangulation of the apex showing at Vasishtha. So when they are crossing horizontally, it appears like this. When they are crossing upright also, the same alignment or the combination continues, but since they are crossing upright, since they crossed upright at the date of Mr. Nilesh Oak's Mahabharata War, he had thought that Arundhati went ahead of Vasishtha, but the fact remains that she was clinging on to Vasishtha only. So this is what is meant by just seeing the result that one wants to see, nothing else. Criticism. The second defect that I find in Mr. Nilesh Oak's so-called scientific research of the Mahabharata date is that Arundhati observation as a falsifier is not a basic sentence if we apply the yardsticks of Karl Popper. Karl Popper says that a basic sentence must have consensus among the relevant community. Here the relevant community is the Mahabharata research community, and this sentence, Arundhati observation as an astronomy event and as a falsifier, has been rejected by all except Dr. Vartak. So, based on this particular class, we can say that Mr. Nilesh Oak's research lacks the scientific acumen that he is claiming. Definitely, Karl Popper would not accept that his research has passed the test of empiricality based on the fact that the falsifier he has taken has not been accepted by a majority of his research community. The third defect that I am going to say now is a much serious one that rejects the so-called scientific theory of Mr. Nilesh Oak as redundant or inapplicable. It is because it says that the basic sentence must be an intersubjective sentence and not a subjective observation. That is, Arundhati observation should not be a subjective observation but an intersubjective observation as mandated by Popper. Let me explain that with an example given earlier. Earlier we said that a statement that all swans were white can be falsified by the presence of black swans, and falsified by the statement that John saw black swans. John saw black swans means it's a subjective statement which is rejected by Popper, whereas it should have been people had seen black swans. Then only Popper has approved that. That is, the falsifier should have been an intersubjective statement or should have been an universal existential statement and should not have been made by a single person. Only John had seen that. So, he is right. So, this is falsified. Not like that. Applying this concept of intersubjective basic sentence given by Karl Popper, we see that the Arundhati observation was not an intersubjective basic sentence because it was reported only by Vyasa. Like we said earlier, in the case of black swans seen by John, which could not be a falsifier. Here we are seeing Vyasa alone making such statement on Arundhati, and that cannot be taken as a falsifier. Even during the time of Mahabharata, before Vyasa had seen, there comes a reference to Arundhati in the dialogue of Kunti at the time of her son's marriage. She blessed her daughter-in-law Draupadi to be like Arundhati. What did she mean? If Arundhati was leading Vasishta at that time, as Mr Nilesh Oak thinks, did Kunti mean that her sons, the 5 Pandavas, should also be clinging on to Draupadi or going after her? Does it make any sense? Why should she say that Draupadi must be like Arundhati, unless she means that she must be like Arundhati following her husband, following the Pandavas? So we don't find the similar observation given by Kunti. After Vyasa had made that statement, we do come across another statement on Arundhati by Bhishma on the arrow bed while he was giving some sermon to the Pandavas. He talks about one Chandli, a lady Chandli, whom he said was elevated as the second Arundhati in the celestial sphere. Did he mean the changed appearance of Arundhati? It cannot be. If she had changed her appearance, we have been telling that the Vedic sages would have removed her from the symbolism. But the symbolism continues. That means she did not change her position. Thus we find the falsification methodology of Nilesh Oak not having any concurrence from anybody at that time or any time in the so-called epoch of Arundhati. And the basic sentence, which should be an intersubjective sentence, fails to be an intersubjective sentence, and thereby we can say the Arundhati observation cannot be taken as a falsifier. Had Popper been alive with us, he would not have accepted this sentence as a basic sentence. Interestingly, we are coming to know from Karl Popper's works that falsification does not apply to astrological concepts. Karl Popper's main aim is to demarcate science from pseudoscience, and astrology is treated by him as a pseudoscience. He says only scientific theories can be falsified, but astrology cannot be falsified. But here what happens? The Arundhati observation, which happens to be a nimitta, has been taken as a falsifier by Mr Nilesh Oak, which Karl Popper would not accept. Astrology concept for scientific dating of Mahabharata, a basic sentence that Karl Popper would never accept as a falsifier. This basic sentence did not fulfill the major criteria of Karl Popper, namely being accepted by a majority community and being intersubjective and not doing anything to do with the astrological concepts. But without knowing these basic ideas, Mr Nilesh Oak has gone on taking up the nimitta, the Arundhati observation as a falsifier, and has claimed that his research is scientific and he is infusing scientific acumen into the people. And not only that, his book on this epoch of Arundhati has been nominated for Lakota's award given for the contribution of philosophy of science of Karl Popper. We are made to wonder whether this is a self-nomination or nominated by people who don't know Karl Popper, what he has talked about, and who don't even know what this falsifier of Mr Nilesh Oak is about. Thankfully, this academy was spared of that embarrassment by not selecting his book for the award. Now comes the mother of ironies. Mr. Nilesh Oak posted this tweet in August this year, 2019, in which he has shown a slide that he used in his recent talk in Seattle, in which he is showing all the ideologues, the books, and the other ideologues who have contributed to his Vyaktinana. And here you can see all big names, and the names of Popper, Hume, and Kuhn. That is Thomas Kuhn, who was a bitter critic of Popper. Karl Popper and Kuhn did not see eye to eye. But Mr. Nilesh Oak has added Kuhn's name also as an ideologue from whom he has gathered his jnana. Strange. Soon after this tweet was posted by him, a fellow Twitterite asked him, "Why did you strike off Thomas Kuhn's name?" Mr. Nilesh Oak has replied in the tweet, "Because the first time I read it, none of it made sense, and whatever little did was trivially true stuff. So when he read for the first time, it didn't make sense. Then why did he include it in the slide?" Then he keeps on writing, "I made a conjecture in 1993 that his work is useless," meaning he has read the book for the first time and come to the conclusion that it is a useless book in 1993, and misleading and fraudulent also. "I left it at that," he says. "If you search, you will find too much evidence in support of my claim. Let it be." But he had come to know of the misleading or useless nature of Kuhn's book at 1993 itself. But why did he include his name in a slide in 2019 and then had stricken it off? Suppose a person has realized that a book is useless in 1993 itself, do you think he will be keeping on including that name in his slides? Definitely this slide was not made in 1993. It is very recently in August 2019 in his talk. It was used. So until now, until August 2019, he had been under the impression that Thomas Kuhn is one of the ideologues from him he has grasped some ideas. But later on he has realized that Thomas Kuhn is a critique of Popper, thereby that whatever Thomas Kuhn says is against what he has been saying. So he has removed his name. That shows that Nilesh Oak had not only not studied Popper fully, but he has not also read Kuhn even fractionally. Just like that, he has included the names, and when he came to know, he has removed them, and when confronted, he has just given a discourse saying that he knew at 1993 itself, but that doesn't fit with what he has given here at 2019. Not only that, Thomas Kuhn's criticism exactly matches with what Nilesh Oak has written in his book. Mr. Nilesh Oak has written at the time of getting a hold on his Epoch of Arundhati that Lady Arundhati was finally pleased with my efforts. That is, Lady Arundhati, who was an epitome of chastity, who has been having the tapasya of following her husband all the time, was pleased that this Nilesh Oak has found out that she has trespassed her limits. He has transgressed his limits. This is what Thomas Kuhn cautioned us. People will go to any extreme, will be fascinated, infatuated to any extreme to twist the ideas, such that here Mr. Nilesh Oak is not at all aware that he is playing with the symbolism of Arundhati. And another sentence also he has written in the book, that Lady Arundhati had not left me yet. That is, Lady Arundhati, an epitome of chastity, had been waiting for Mr. Nilesh Oak to prove that she is not a chaste woman. This is what the tradition or the symbolism of Arundhati is about. But Nilesh Oak is made to make a kind of statement like this goes to show how much the falsificationist methodology has blinded his reason, as Thomas Kuhn has criticized. So finally, what we are seeing is that chaste Arundhati has been massacred at the altar of a false falsifier. The falsity of the falsificationist approach of Mr. Nilesh Oak does not end with this. There are other criticisms also that I have put forth in my book, The Myth of the Epoch of Arundhati of Nilesh Oak, which is available as an e-book in Kindle Unlimited. Interested people can read the rest of the story on falsification in that book. And for any queries, I can be contacted in these IDs. Thanks for listening.